Hello, hello, hello. Oh, hi. Hey.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so looking forward to this chat.
I know, me too. I was a little nervous because I was getting a little technical difficulties, but
Oh
we're
no,
here, so
that's always my biggest fear with things.
I'm super excited. I see that, oh my God, there's all these people that are joining in, which is super awesome. Hi everyone. Thanks for joining in the chat. My name is Pamphinette Buisa. My pronouns are she, her. I play rugby sevens for Team Canada, and I'm a new Olympian. Just came back from Tokyo, and yeah, I'm just super excited. A big thing for me whenever I start anything is just to start things in the right way. So I'm currently doing this live from home, my parents' home, on the Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory, also known as Gatineau, Quebec. And yeah, super excited. And for those who don't know, that should know, I'm having this chat with Tessa Virtue. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, thanks so much for the introduction. And I will say, welcome back to Canadian soil. How did it feel?
Man, it was the jet lag is still really real. And yeah, I'm super excited. I haven't been home in like a year because of COVID. So my parents are actually right now getting ready for a barbecue that we're gonna celebrate me being back. So I'm super super
That's
happy.
nice. It was a great chance for them to hear all of your stories and also for you to get some context where people were when they were watching you from home, how they were feeling, what kind of emotions they were dealing with, because it would have been such a different and separate experience for you guys to live. I'm so curious. We'll dive into that later. I'm sure I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited, and I think yeah, whenever my parents are very, very African, so they're just always super excited just to see us on TV, the fact that I was on TV. So I know that it's going to be a great chat that we're going to get on today. So here on the kit, we're going to be talking about competition, the Olympics, ambition, and what it means to be an Olympian. So if you haven't sent me any questions, I had a couple of people send me in my DMs, but I have a couple questions here. And to kind of dive into it, I know Tessa, you are a really big deal, and you have been to three Olympics. So, what does it mean to you to be an Olympian?
When I think about, what it means to be an Olympian, well, two things come to mind. The first is just the meaningful purpose that I felt in pursuing a goal, kind of on that level, on that magnitude. It's all encompassing. It's one single focus that is this beacon of light for every part of your life. And what a gift that is. Really, it's rare. But
Mm,
mostly I think about representing Canada and just how lucky we are and what kind of values Canadians embody and how we get to take the world stage, wear that maple leaf proudly, and do what we love to do. I
mm.
think the Olympics, are something that really unify a country, and we've seen that even watching from home the Tokyo Games, and that never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah, no, I completely agreed. I think you really touched on that the aspect of representation. I think for myself, I know that especially in our community, a lot of women don't really leave home until they kind of are getting married and things of that sort. So being able to be in my community, my parents are from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and see all my cousins and all these things, and be able to show up on the world stage, and then come back home to my Gatineau community, and just being welcomed back to what I come from, and I'm just I 100% agree with you. Just that concept of representation and being able to show up for more than just yourself.
Totally. Yes.
Yeah.
Well said. Yeah, that's so powerful.
Yeah. And I think with the Olympics, I remember I was very jet lagged on the first night, and I left my like the Olympic Village room, like Canada House, and I walked down to the Olympic rings, and it was like 4 in the morning. I would say that was one of my most memorable
Uh,
Olympic moments. I was just there. I was like, I'm
I know, hearing that story, and
here.
that. Thank you for sharing. That is so cool, so special, and a silver lining of jet lag, perhaps.
Yeah, right. But what would you say is one of your most memorable Olympic moments?
There are some obvious ones. Singing "O Canada" on home soil when we won in Vancouver. When the music ended in Pyeongchang and we had completed our free dance, and that experience marching in with the flags in the opening ceremonies in Korea. But similar to your story, I think the moments that come flooding through my mind when you ask that question are really like biking around the Olympic Village in Sochi with Scott. We didn't go to opening ceremonies, so we could see fireworks from a distance and felt like we were the only two in the village, and we were just like kids again, just biking. Or, those spontaneous encounters in the cafeteria with athletes from different sports and getting to have these conversations, realizing that our sports may be so different, and yet there are so many common themes and feelings and emotions once you get to that level. And I just loved those moments. Did you get those? Like, what was it like competing through the pandemic, and what was your experience in Tokyo like?
It was so interesting. So everybody had to have a mask on the whole time while we were like in any common areas. Even if we're like leaving our rooms, we have to have our mask on. So you only have to look at someone's outline and kind of guess who they are. And the only time you would see someone's actual face is if they're sitting down in kind of a cubicle in the meal hall. So it was kind of difficult to even identify and point out who was who in a way. But I think the closest proximity I got to people was kind of trading pins. I was an avid pin trader. So for those that don't know, when you get to the Olympic Village, you get your kit, you get all these things, and you also get these pins, and you put it on your lanyard, and you trade. You trade with different athletes, and I was able to do that. And like, hey, what sport you play? And you see like people of different shapes and sizes, and it was so cool to, like, as you're saying, meet different athletes from across the world, just being their best for themselves, for their country. In just all one space. So
Mm-hmm.
it was super awesome.
Probably more overwhelming in the summer games, just because there are, I think, double the amount of athletes or more than that. So I've always wondered just the difference in ambiance and atmosphere, depending on the season.
Yeah, I would say especially like for us, I mean, this is only the second time around where the Olympics, the rugby sevens is in the Olympics. Being there with some of my teammates, they went to Rio that went there the first time. Kind of getting the background scoop beforehand and then showing up again
Yeah.
was cool to get that warning before in a way.
Well, that you travel anywhere, you have that inherent support network with you always, which I think is so cool for a bigger team like that.
100%. And I think, speaking of teams, there's been quite a bit of conversation around, women in sport, especially around these games and just kind of games in general. And particularly, a lot of teams have been showing up when it comes to standing in solidarity for different initiatives. Particularly, there was like the beach handball players petitioning to wear shorts instead of bikini bottoms. A couple of German gymnasts wore full unitards. Our team, actually, we wore orange. We had like orange tape, orange shoelaces, orange scrunchies to stand in solidarity with the indigenous communities. So there's a lot of conversation around women and their uniforms and kind of outlining and trying to stand up for something, again, beyond their sport. So as an athlete, a former athlete, have you felt pressure to conform to a certain idea of what it may look like while competing?
Well, I loved that your team did that. That was incredible to see. And you're right, it's been powerful. There's always a bit of a political lens that the Olympics are seen through, and not often are athletes given the chance to speak up or make a stand, take a stand. And did I feel that in my sport? I mean, I think interestingly, we had a rule where I think it was you had to be 50% covered, at least your torso. As we were designing our costumes, that was one element of it. And I was watching the beach volleyball players, for example, and I remember just a couple of weeks ago, looking up the rules and restrictions on what they were mandated to wear. And it is crazy to me that anyone would be in a position to feel uncomfortable and would be told that they needed to wear something so skimpy, for example, that doesn't help them do their sport. I loved that Pink stepped up and said that she would pay the fines.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was incredible. I just feel like, gosh, we have to catch up. Um, I felt it more in skating. For official practices, we had judges and officials watching, and it was expected that you would wear full hair and makeup, costume, and basically put on a show. And I always resented that, and
Hmm.
and had a really hard time kind of grappling with that. You know, there's a glitz and glamour element to ice dance for sure, but to me, I felt it took away from the technical side of things. And
Mm-hmm.
there were definitely moments in my touring days when I was part of an ensemble and perhaps not totally comfortable with what the costume was, how revealing it was, and also then being compared directly to other female figure skaters wearing the same thing. And I remember just wanting to kind of curl up and hide and not wanting to sort of put myself out there on display. And I think it's great these conversations are happening, but at the same time, I'm shaking my head just thinking, what? It's 2021.
Yeah.
Why is it taking us so long to get there?
Yeah, I 100%. That's tough, especially that aspect when you're talking about just the certain aspects of almost your femininity being highlighted, almost taking away from your ability to focus on the technicality of what the sport is. And I think that the more that we have conversations like this, the more that women do stand up and be like, "Hey, like watch me play." It shouldn't be about that's really interesting about the how to be 50% covered versus not versus things like that. It's a very specific rule.
It's very specific, you know, and I think at the end of my career, I felt grateful that I could take ownership of how I wanted to be presented and what I felt good taking the ice in. And for us, it was about telling a story and becoming a character. And I tried to make it part of my sport journey so that I felt really confident in it. I think without
mm,
that, if someone else was dictating all of that, it would have been so different. Even in training,
mm,
I had to sort of shift things a little bit by wearing training clothes when everyone else was in full costumes and little things like that. Like were so risky at the time, but you just sort of have to move the dial. And I'm not saying that I did that, but from my own experience, taking a bit of control back was important.
which is awesome, especially when it comes to pushing these constraints aside so that you could actually focus on what you're doing, and you're very successful at it. So that's that's really awesome. When it comes to certain kind of misconceptions about athletes, what do you think are some major misconceptions?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I think, there's this idea that athletes are unidimensional. And sometimes I understand that because when you're focusing all of your time and energy on one thing, it's really hard to have balance. But, you know, I want the athletes' stories to be told because there's so much more depth to them than I think sometimes is seen at first. I think, there's an interesting line between professional sports and amateur. So sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that, we're watching these athletes compete at the Olympics right now, and the idea that they're as supported, that they have the resources, that, I think it's underestimated just what it takes as far as, the amount of work, the team around you. It's so, as I mentioned earlier, all encompassing. And I think that gets muddied, because every 2 years we love to tune in and we love to see these athletes strive and perform to be their best. But sometimes I think what we're lacking in the middle there is the support, and how do we rally around athletes in that sense. So I think there are some misconceptions around what is available to amateur athletes. How about you? How do you answer that?
Ooh, I'd honestly say the same thing. I'd say like a big thing in our team we were really pushing for was like we're more than just athletes. I think, particularly for myself, a lot of my involvements outside of sport is very much immersed in community and doing a lot of advocacy around BIPOC folks, so Black, Indigenous people of color, people who are unhoused, women in sport, and just people that are oftentimes, ignored within the grand scheme of society. A lot of my engagements is because I realize that I'm very privileged. I'm able to travel the world, be in spaces that, a lot of people, aren't in. And I think it's important that whenever I come into the sporting world, that I do remember those that have elevated me to be where I'm in that space. And when I think about especially when the pandemic happened, at that point we didn't know if the Olympics was going to happen. We didn't know what was going to happen. And what I did, I was working at a hotel. And that's the thing we talk about. Like, people don't know that some athletes have to work because, funding sometimes is tough. So I was also working at a hotel, and that hotel became temporary housing for unhoused folks. So seeing that lens shift where I was, crying about my Olympic dream potentially not happening, I see that people who live 50 minutes away from me may not have food, may not have the supports and adequate things to help them live and survive. So for me, it was tuning in and checking in with the local community, with the Indigenous community, with my teammates. Oh my goodness, my teammates, my people, they really, man, all the Zoom chats that, oh man, it was so beautiful to have community. And that's why I make sure that in any space I go to, that I come with it. I come with my community, and for people to remember that, yes, you see us play, yes, there's an athlete, there's all these things, but we have to remember that, we're humans first. If you
Yeah.
want to see us play, you have to see us, you have to see how we move, how we can articulate ourselves, how we express ourselves. And sports is oftentimes an avenue for us to show up and be us. So, yeah.
Yeah. What a beautiful way to leverage the platform you've been given that you have so rightfully earned. And I think that is incredible. What perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I think the perspective is that's why, like, literally when I was at the Olympics, I was just like, there's just greats around me. Like, I was just like, there's like Team Jamaica walking by, Andre DeGrasse is just, I was like, whoa, this is like cool. This is it was just awesome to take everything in and just remember that I get to take all these experiences and bring it back,
Yeah.
and that's what's awesome about all of it.
Amazing.
So let's talk about ambition. What does that word mean to you?
I think if someone were to ask me to define myself in one word, it would probably be ambitious. It's the driving force in every part of my life, and it always has been. It's just this fire that burns deeply within me. I'm obsessed with improving and getting better, and in whatever space that is. It was, on the ice for so much of my life, but I just want to be the very best person I can be, and whatever kind of new challenge or task I take on. I'm driven by that, and that is, a great motivator for sure. And I think it's been, something that I've been able to rely on because I can't turn it off. But I also think that with ambition comes this ability to be strategic, because you have to be able to analyze opportunities and then selectively choose what you aim for, and what you delve into fully. And that's been kind of fun to navigate, especially post skating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. How about you? Tell me about
Ambition.
and coming out of the Olympics. Do you feel, on the heels of that you're already looking ahead? As athletes, we're just forward and future thinking, sometimes to our detriment. But do you feel any different now that you're officially an Olympian?
Well, I think it's still like hitting me, the fact that now it's like my name, I'm an Olympian. It's still kind
Yeah.
of like starting to seep in. I think the more people are like, "Oh my God, you're an Olympian," I'm like, "Oh yeah," like that's a thing. So it's just an evolving process, and I think for me, like, especially with these games, as soon as you're done playing, immediately after you're back home in Canada, right? So it was a really big high. You play all these games, and then like literally the next day you're flying and you're going back home.
And you're
So
watching
it's
now, being like, that's what I was just
yeah,
doing.
literally. Literally, like I'm watching my like
Yeah.
it's crazy. It's like
Yeah.
it's so quick the turnaround. So I feel like for myself, it's now that I'm officially an Olympian, it's realizing like what do I love, and I still love playing rugby. So I'm not done playing rugby. Um, I still know that there's opportunity to um, speak more, talk more, connect more with more people. I think that with the opportunity to be international and to be in more higher spaces, um, is to really integrate myself more and more in community. I think that through the year, I've been able to see a lot of people in different spaces, and the more that I can stay grounded and check in with my teammates, check in with those around me, um, will better inform me on what is my next step. And I think I'm still also in school, so that's finishing up my degree at the same time, and still playing rugby, and just like finding different things in community that aren't part of the conversation. So I want to find who isn't in the conversation. How can I bring them in? So it's kind of what's
Love
next for me.
that sort of be throughout your like all the different facets of your life that it can be sparked and ignited in different ways. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And I think ambition is such a cool thing because I think, as you were saying, it's like a constant driver that like it's what's next? How can I elevate my game, my mind, my space, always. And with that, wanting to learn and be better, how do you deal with defeat?
Hmm. How do you deal with defeat? Well, I think, it's inherent in an athlete's process
Mm-hmm.
that you deal with defeat daily. There are constant setbacks and struggles and adversities that you're having to face, throughout training, that it sort of instills this grit or resilience in you so much that it becomes part of your story. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a strength for a lot of elite athletes, in that you know failure, if you will, is embraced as just the ultimate learning opportunity, and defeat is just easier to handle if you feel you've done everything you possibly can to prepare.
Mm-hmm.
And Scott was really a good teacher in that capacity. He often, reminded me that we wanted all of our competitors to be at their very best.
Mm-hmm.
He was able to objectively sort of step back and realize sometimes we weren't the best today, or that's the beauty of sport, is that it can go one way or another depending on the moment. And so I think defeat, it just becomes part of your story. And often, if you were to fast forward to a keynote speech that you might give 10 or 20 years down the road, those are the most interesting stories to tell. That's where the lessons are, and that's where the real growth happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's bang on. And I think it's, as you were saying, as an athlete, it's improving your relationship with failure and finding out what is your relationship with failure. Because I think, especially at the beginning when I started as a development athlete, I wasn't making all the tours. I wasn't, constantly making a lot of minutes, but it was okay if I'm here and I'm there. So typically with sevens, usually we'll take 12 athletes, and sometimes we'll bring a 13th player just in case someone gets injured, things of that sort. And oftentimes I was selected as number 13 or 14 or things of that sort. So
Mm.
it's being able to, some may see it as a defeat, like, oh, you didn't make the team, but it's kind of finding what is your role within that. And I think for me, throughout my career on this team, it's been embracing, if I'm number 13, be the best number 13. Bring the water, bring the music. I'm a huge, if you ask anyone on my team, I'm blasting music. You know what I mean? So just be.
Yeah. And what empathy you would be able to have with other 13s, 14s, in those roles. And I think you can offer just such great mentorship, in that way, which is everything, especially on a team.
Yeah, 100%. And I think what I love about Seven so much is that there's so much, you need everybody. Sometimes there's the powerhouse, there's the more evasive, there's the speedsters, there are people that have their role. And it's kind of figuring out what your role is within the greater team. And I think as our team has evolved and the team culture has evolved, I think that it's figuring out like how can you make your space, create a space, and feel safe in that space. So
Yeah.
yeah. So with that, how did you keep yourself motivated? And like, how did you reward yourself at the same time?
Oh, you know, part of motivation was acknowledging that it wasn't going to be there 7 days a week. And I think accountability in my mind, accountability and motivation are sort of connected, because on the days when I woke up and I didn't really feel intrinsically motivated, I was able to realize that I was accountable to a partner and I had a responsibility to show up for him and for the team. And I guess connecting to that greater why, our purpose, once I really knew that, I was able to transform every, like, I should go to the gym, I should do a double run through. I was able to translate those into I want to because, I and work hard so that I can be the best, or I want to do the double run through so when I get to competition things are easier. And taking the should out of our vocabulary was really big for us. So the motivation, I think sometimes you have to put your body through the motions even when it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
I day just jumped out of bed and was so excited to go skate. That's just not realistic. But on the whole, I think you have to believe that you're chasing something that is meaningful and that holds great value and purpose for you.
Mhm.
What motivates you?
What motivates me? I'd say my family, to be honest. I think my parents are just so resilient. As I was saying before, they're from the Congo, and they are just so hardworking. They came from there, they came to Canada, and they, were educated, went to school. When they arrived here, none of their credentials was recognized. So they had to go back to school, had to restart, and work their way through. Um, and they've sacrificed so much for me and my little sister. And just seeing them always have a smile on their face. My dad picked me up, dropped me off, picked up my friends, dropped us off. Like sometimes, like I play volleyball early on too, and just dropping me off and always being there, playing a sport like rugby. And he's like, I don't know what that is, but you like it. So I'll be there, sure. You know what I mean? And so it's just seeing how committed they were to my dream pushes me to commit and believe in myself as well. So I think as you were saying, like those days where like, man, I have to hit someone over and over again in this water. It's Victoria, so it's raining all the time,
Yeah.
you know, like, but I know that my parents put in the work. They invested so much in me. Um, and so I got to represent while I'm here. So.
That's it's so beautiful, and I think it goes to show just the impact that delayed gratification can have. And when you're chasing something, just to try and keep that long-term perspective on the things around you that matter or don't matter in that one given moment.
100%. And well, I think my last question, or maybe I have my last question, then we'll maybe take like one question from the audience. And what's next for you? What's
Hmm.
next?
Well, like you, I'm in school, so I have another, probably 7 or 8 months of schoolwork to do, which is great. I've been learning so much, and it's so fun to be back in the virtual classroom. And I started working with Deloitte, so we have some really exciting projects, and again, just a great learning opportunity to be exposed to so many different areas of business. I'm loving that. Some really fun sponsor collaborations like Bon Look, these glasses.
I saw that. I was like, ooh, those look
um,
good.
it's been really awesome to sort of have that creative outlet, and the fashion side of things to innovate and now kind of see that come to light and share that with so many people. It's been really fun and fulfilling to pursue.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. School, I mean, it's long, but I love it.
Yeah.
It's
Well, so proud of ourselves when we're on the other side of it.
Yeah, I agree. Soon. I'll see if there's one last question in the,
Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
yeah.
So
Let's
nice.
see. Last question. Um, okay. There's been a lot of conversation around athletes' commitment to the sport and balancing that with life and making sure that you can care about your mental health. Can you tell us about your perspective and love you both? That's from Anna Healy 1.
Thanks, Anna. Um, I mean, from my perspective, I think, especially as an athlete, we spend so many hours fine tuning our bodies physically to perform at this optimal condition and state. And it is equally important to prioritize our mental health and well being. And whether that's handling pressure and dealing with competition, or it's something greater. With mental health. And I think it's incredibly important to talk about it, to share, to try and diminish the stigma that seems to be still surrounding mental health. But it's also important to have the right people around you and reach out for help, whether that's a therapist, a sports psychologist, friends, family, loved ones that can offer some support. I think it's important to people know that they're not alone. And you know, there are people out there that want to lift you up, that want to support you, or that can validate your feelings because they are real, they're yours, and no one should have an opinion on how you should be feeling.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. And I think, yeah, as you were saying that mental health is just another testament of certain things that people don't really see as part of what it is to be human. And I
Mm.
think that as we saw many athletes, even here in Tokyo, that, you know, stood up for what they needed. And I think the more that we grant athletes the autonomy and the agency to be human, to feel, the more that we can have more in-depth conversations about ourselves and about what we're going through. Because I think, especially as elite athletes, there's like this level of elitism that like, oh, you do this and this is good, this is bad. There's not a lot of opportunity for us to be. And the more that we can create space for mental health, as you were saying, with the different resources, like psychologists, even like having a safety network. I know on our team, like we do check-ins. Before we start any session, we'll start off with a territorial acknowledgement and we'll do a check-in. How are you feeling? So then at least we know that we can check in with one another that, hey, if this person's going through it, I know I got to cheer for you extra loud. Or if you're having a good day, well, let's go.
Yeah,
Let's dance to Suavemente. You know what I mean? Like there's different things, and I think the more that we can ingrain that within our sport, the more we'll see greatness in all aspects.
totally agree. Yeah, I think there's an element of self-reflection that is required, and also just, you highlighted so beautifully that vulnerability can be a real strength and an asset, and that should be celebrated and cherished. Good question.
100%. Yeah, thank you so much for
I
the
feel like
question.
we could just guys have.
Yeah, well, I think that wraps up today's segment. I'm so happy to meet you. It was so
Like that.
nice. It was great, and I think for the kit, I think we'll be saving this chat. And for more questions, feel free to probably DM me or send a message probably to to Tessa as well. We'll probably continue it offline. But thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. It was super fun.
Yay! Thanks so much for the chat. Thanks.
All right. See ya.